It's not just a problem in Athens, it's a problem all around the world. As we've seen this year, cities have to start really preparing for extreme heat. We've been talking about global warming for decades, but somehow cities have not really been taking seriously the fact that they will be dealing with very high temperatures, both cities in the south and cities in the north as well, unexpectedly, and maybe more with more victims because they're less prepared. So what am I to do? First of all, raising awareness and making more clear what the dangers that extreme heat phenomena bring along are for the populations of cities. We don't pay enough attention to that, and we don't know enough about heat waves and how dangerous they are, because they are what they call the silent killers. They roll into cities silently and kind of secretly, and you don't see roofs flying and flooded cars. You just maybe afterwards hear the number of people that died from them, and often we don't even hear about that. So, and there's also a great amount of underreporting for morbidity and mortality that is linked to heat. So we have to make all this much more obvious and evident, and educate both policymakers and the public about it. Part of what we think is going to be a sea change is to start naming and categorizing heat waves. And that would both help the people like yourself to communicate them more clearly to people, but also it would link to policymakers with rolling out specific policies linked on how dangerous each of these heat waves are. And the most vulnerable are, as most people know, the people above 60 years old, women that are pregnant, little children, people that work outdoors or indoors without air conditioning. So people that do manual work are very are very vulnerable to extreme heat. So we have to make all of the surfaces of the city capable to lower temperatures. And that means a radical increase of nature within cities, because that's our best, I mean, along with other things like technologies and materials and all that, but mostly trees and water. We have to really bring trees and water into cities in a radical way.
The hotter it gets, the more air conditioning we use, and that's responsible for tons of CO2 emissions every year.
You're absolutely right. It's a very big problem, not only for CO2 emissions, but also for heating the outside, because it's a vicious circle what air conditionings do, because they blow hot air out into the public sector while they cool the indoors. So it's a very what's it called?
A double-edged sword.
A double-edged sword. And we know that in about the 1.6 billion air-conditioned units that are working today around the world are burning the same amount of energy as the whole continent of Africa for all of its energy uses. So you're right, it absolutely it's one of the most energy spending appliances that we have in our home, and it also heats the outdoors. So it's not a solution. The solution is that we start building our buildings differently. We have been talking a lot about energy upgrades, but we have to start really doing heat upgrading our buildings, like making them much more resilient to heat.
Economically, this is a potential problem to try and stop global warming and prevent extreme temperatures and extreme weather conditions. How strong or well equipped is the Greek economy to deal with these measures and make the necessary changes?
Stephen, it has never been a priority. All these issues are issues of priority and how you cleverly figure out ways to move to the future. What is your vision of your country in the future? and then you can align the budgets and your policies to actually work for that. We haven't done this at all. It's this summer has really been a wake-up call for our politicians who have for the first time started really taking it a little more seriously.
Dr. Eleni Myrivili, Europe's first chief heat officer. Many thanks for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thanks for having me.